Desmond. Hi, Desmond.
How you doing, Jerisa? How are you?
I'm good. Am you okay?
Yeah, I think you're a little delayed, but we can make do.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I am going to start with introducing you. I am very excited to spend the next several minutes talking about your life and talking about what you're doing today. So, without further ado, to everyone who's joined us today, thank you again. And let's talk about Desmond. So, Desmond is the president of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. He is also the chair of Floridians for a Fair Democracy and a graduate of Florida International University College of Law. The FRRC was historic victory in 2018 with the successful passage of Amendment 4, which restored voting rights to over 1.4 million Floridians with past felony convictions. Amendment 4 represented the single largest expansion of voting rights in the United States and brought it into 150 years of the Jim Crow era law in Florida. Desmond has been recognized by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world for 2019. He was also named Floridian and Central Floridian of the Year in 2019, and he has made numerous appearances on radio and television shows such as Al Jazeera, Democracy Now!, MSNBC with Joy Ann Reid, Fox News with Dan Perino, and many, many more. And not only he has done all of those things, he has a new book called Let My People Vote. Desmond. So I want to start with learning about, those are amazing accomplishments. And we're seeing this amazing person here today. But I want to take a step back and start a little at the beginning. So you were born in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you later moved to Miami with your family. Can you talk a little bit about how was your childhood? What was that like?
Well, first of all, Jerisa, I got to say that it is indeed an honor to even be here right now, speaking with you on Quelly TV. I got to give a huge shout out, especially when you got sisters at the helm, of this apparatus here. And I'm honored to be a part of it, and so I'm looking forward to a very bright future for Quelly TV, and I'm glad that you guys had the opportunity to interview me. You asked me about my childhood, and I can't give away too much, right? Because there's some things in the book that folks just gonna have to read, right? But you know, um, and then I hear you say, "Well, I'm an amazing guy." I think I'm just an ordinary person. I think that what happens is that ordinary people are presented with extraordinary times and given opportunities to do extraordinary things. And I'm just an ordinary person that's done that. Born in the St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, came over to the United States at a young age, and for the most part, I lived in South Florida in Dade County, representing 305 for quite some time. But I think midway through my school year, my mom and dad separated, and my dad moved to Illinois in the suburb right outside of Chicago. And so I used to split my time between my mom and my dad, and I was exposed real early to the different worlds there because in Illinois I was attending basically an all white school, and in South Florida I was attending basically an all black school, and so I got to see so much at a young age that I think it unknowingly it helped shape who I am today. But my childhood was, I would say, a typical childhood, and I enjoyed the benefits of having parents that loved me, and a huge family, a bunch of brothers and sisters to fight with, right? And also to love on as well. And
Yes, you
so,
had.
yeah.
It, it sounds like you had a really huge family, and I did enjoy. Oh, sorry, I think there were some technical issues. I enjoyed reading that part of your book, and I wanted to kind of know, about that season of your life, because I also wanted to know what led you to your drug addiction. I know that you started dabbling in alcohol pretty early, but was there something in your past that led you to drug addiction?
I think when I stop and think about it, so I grew up in what I guess they call now a blended family, right? And so I had brothers who were and sisters who were we didn't share the same mother, you know, and like I said, it was a bunch of us, and one of the things at a young age that I realized was that I was like really looking to belong. I was looking for love. And at a young age, I definitely didn't understand the dynamics of a blended family and the challenges that it presented. Right. And but what I noticed was that the time that our families used to have the best time, at least it seemed like that to me, was like when we had like someone had a birthday or something, right? And we'll have a birthday party, but then all the church folks would leave, and when they leave, the liquor come out, right? And then we really partying and to reggae, soca, calypso, I know all kinds of island music, and people
Oh.
are drinking, and I'm sneaking a little drink there. But early on, I think I associated having a good time with drinking, right? And then that led, in my, teen years to experimenting with marijuana, and then eventually to harder drugs. But for quite some time, and it wasn't until actually during my recovery, and I actually speak about this piece in my book about my first experience jet skiing, right? When
Mhm.
I realized I was having so much fun, and and I was able to briefly overcome my fear of alligators, right? Because we was on the lake, but it just hit me like a brick wall that it was the first time that I could recall in my life that I was actually having fun and I wasn't under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And that moment actually gave me hope to let me know that I can live a productive life. I can enjoy my life without having to get high, right?
Mhm.
But early on, for some reason, I did associate, uh, drinking with good times, and that's when
Yeah.
our family, I think, was closest, because everybody's laughing and dancing and having fun, and it wasn't, we didn't have the disagreements.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you hit on that sense of belonging, because I was wondering if that was a struggle for you, and and how that could have been connected to the drug addiction. And so you went through a series of going in and out of programs to kind of help you, and then there was a moment in your life where you really, I know that you were going through a lot, but it seemed like you really had hit rock bottom, where you felt like no one, not even God, loved you. Can you talk about that time where you were on your way to central intake, and well, tell us about that moment. I don't want to give too
All right,
much
I
away,
see you read the book.
but
Yeah, I think though that story really starts like the day before, right?
Mhm.
When I was desperate, I wanted to get high, and I was trying to find call around and see if I can get somebody to give me some money, right, under some kind of false pretense. And I called an old childhood friend of mine, and he, instead of giving me money, what he said was that, man, listen, I know somebody that if you can get to this pastor and have her pray for you, that it will really be helpful. And when he told me that, you know I had a moment of inspiration. I was like, man, that would be amazing. And so I remember taking the last bit of change that I had just to catch a bus halfway there and walk the rest of the way. Um, and not even knowing how I was going to get back, but I just had so much hope and faith that I'm going to meet this
Mhm.
woman of God and she's going to pray for me and something miraculous is going to happen and I'll be able to get off the streets and get off drugs. And I remember walking up to the church and just when it was about to begin service and I walked in and I sat in the back and I stayed throughout the entire service. And at the end of the service, I approached the pastor and not immediately told him, listen, I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking you for food or anything, but I'm homeless. I'm addicted to drugs. And a friend of mine's told me that if I can just get some prayer, I'll be all right. And I I need you to pray for me. And I remember that she put her hands on my shoulder. And I mean, just thinking about it, it's kind of hurtful, but she put a hand on my shoulder and pointed to another guy in the church and told me to go to him to make an appointment for the next day, right? And I'm
Mhm.
screaming in my head, woman, don't you understand how desperate I am? Don't you understand that
Mhm.
I spent my last to come here and all I'm asking for is prayer? And you're gonna tell me I need to make an appointment, right? And it was when I was walking out of that church when I, thought, man, even God has turned his back on me. And that
Mhm.
night was the first time ever. Now, mind you, I've been homeless for quite some time, but that was the first time ever that I actually slept in public, right? And what I mean is that in the past, I would find an abandoned building, I would sleep behind the Dipsy dumpster, or probably, lay out in somebody's house or the drug hole or whatever. But I never ever went to sleep in plain view. But that night, I remember I got down to another area and I slept on a bus bench, and I didn't even care who drove by or walked by and seen me. That was it for me. That was it.
Yeah.
And then it was the next day that as I was approaching railroad tracks, my mind went back to a few weeks earlier how a gentleman committed suicide by train, and I just became fixated with that story. And when I got to those railroad tracks, I couldn't move. I could not cross those tracks. And I stood there waiting on that train. And while I was waiting on that train, I was just what was going through my mind was how much pain I was going to feel, whether it would be over quickly or I had to go through moments of agonizing pain. And I could tell you, Jerisa, that not even the thought of the pain that I may have had to have endure was enough to scare me into crossing those tracks. And I stood there and I waited for that train.
But then there was a moment where that train of thought broke, and what was it that led you to cross those tracks and to keep going to central intake? Because that was a life-changing decision and moment,
I
literally.
mean, to this day, I can tell you. I could
Mhm.
not tell you what broke that trance. I mean, I remember thinking about how, man, my mom and dad didn't raise me to be in this position, but here I was, and how, I was like, I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And I stayed there. God knows how long,
Yeah.
and I can't tell you what made me cross those tracks. But what I can tell you, and I think that is so pivotal, in my life, and it's a question that I think folks should ponder. Was when I crossed the tracks, I stopped and I looked back at the tracks and I asked myself a very simple question, and it was, if I would have died, how many people would come to my funeral?
Mm.
Right. And that was the start right there.
Mhm.
Because, initially my answer was zero. Nobody would have came because, I was a homeless crackhead. All right. And I wasn't walking around with IDs and everybody didn't know where I was at or whatever. And so if I would have died, they would have buried me probably in the pauper's grave. Right. And
Mm.
nobody would have ever known. Right.
Mm.
And I didn't like that. And even when I changed the the facts around, and I said, okay, Desmond, you die, the train runs over you, kills you, but the Miami Herald, which was a major paper in South Florida, have in the headline, bold headlines, right? Have your picture at the top of the fold, not the bottom, but at the top of the fold. Desmond killed by train, right? How many people would come? And after thinking long and hard, I only came up with 4 people. And out of those 4, maybe 2 would have cried. And
Mm.
that thought really made me question my time spent on this planet. And I was like, man, after all these years of living on this planet and living all these different places and having all types of relationships, you mean to tell me only 4 people would care if you died? And have your life been that insignificant?
Right.
That question I took with me when I entered into drug treatment.
And it carried you through.
Oh
It's
yeah.
such, it's an important, I mean, it's so important, especially as we talk about mental health with Black men, with the Black community. So it's so important to touch on that sense of just needing to be, because you said it several times in just the excerpt that I read about wanting to be loved.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
that simple thing of wanting to be loved.
Yep. I mean, and we can go a step further than that, right?
Mhm.
Because not only that, right, but then especially, I mean, you touch a nerve when you talk about men, because just the thought about appearing to be weak, right? The thought about being wrong, the thought about wanting to ask for help and having that being seen as a sign of weakness, right?
Yeah.
And not realizing, and the thing that I discovered in my journey, all right, is how to embrace my defects, how to embrace my weaknesses,
Mhm.
and actually use my weaknesses in such a way that they become my strength, right? And
Mhm.
and use how to take situations like with me, the same things that used to cause me to walk around with my head down when I was homeless are the exact same things that have lifted me up to this place, that have caused me to actually be named one of the 100 most influential people in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's the same story. The same story that I ran from is the same story that uplifts me. And so I think what's so crucial is, how do we not run from our pain? How do we not run from our weaknesses, right? Or perceived weaknesses, and how we embrace that, right?
Yeah.
And use these things to actually not necessarily create a better me, but to create a better world, right? To create a
Mhm.
better community. And I believe I stumbled on it. A lot of those ingredients, I think all of the ingredients is in my book. You
Mhm.
know that, listen, and I remember joking when I went to the gala, the Time 100 gala, and I remember meeting some of the key people in Time, and I was like, why the hell y'all got The Rock on y'all cover? Y'all should have been putting me on y'all cover
Right.
for that edition, because it shows that you don't have to be a movie star, you don't have to be an athlete, you know what I'm saying, you don't have to be a politician to be influential in the world or in your
Mhm.
community, right? That if that person, that Desmond, who was homeless and a crackhead, could be influential, then that means that any one of us has the opportunity and have what it takes to influence our communities, influence our state, influence the world, right? And I think it's just so important for people to understand that you don't have to be that extraordinary person, but you could take the things that you've gone through, you could take who you are and use it as a tool to help others. And it's in the helping of others that your greatness would appear, right? And the impact
I
will
love
appear.
it. I love it. Serving others. And so how many years did you spend in prison before you got out and started taking steps to create these initiatives that we have today?
Well, I think, all right. So I spent, I'm gonna say, a total of 6 years
Okay.
in prison. I did 3 military prison, and then I did
Wow.
3 in the state. And then of course, I don't even want to add up all the times I've been in and out of the county jails, right?
Mm.
But I know the last time I was incarcerated, I was sentenced in 2011 to 15 years And I end up serving only 3 of those 15 years because I ended up working on my case and having my conviction overturned, reversed, and remanded. And so I was able to give back 12 of those years. But
Wow.
that was the last time I've ever been incarcerated in handcuffs or anything like that.
So you've touched on this already a little bit, but I want to just take another look at it. So there's a quote in your book, and you say, "Man, when I get out, I want my life to improve, and I don't want to come back to prison. I want to be loved. I want to have a family. I want to be able to have nice things, and maybe I can make amends to folks I hurt. And I need to find a way to do it." And so I want to talk about a little bit how you were able to identify your purpose and what led you to focus on law.
How was I able to identify my purpose? Man, let me tell you, the general answer was when I was in drug treatment, and this was after getting out of prison. Because you got to remember, I got out of prison, right? So I wasn't confined by bars anymore, right? But I was
Mm,
still confined by drug addiction. And
mm,
so less than a year after being released from prison was when I was in front of those railroad tracks, right? And in spite of all of the good thoughts I may have had in prisons and the aspirations I may have had, right? Because of the drug addiction, right? I was unable to fulfill those aspirations. But when I went into drug treatment, towards the end of drug treatment, I I I was in a group session, and it was something that I said during the group session that had impacted somebody else. Right now, part of that story, Teresa, is that I remember in my head, I'm still thinking about how insignificant my life was, right?
mm,
And maybe a month or so after I got into drug treatment, Rosa Parks passed away.
wow.
And when I seen the outpouring of love that was given to her, when her body laid in state in Return to the Capitol, that just triggered something in my head, and I started planning my own funeral. Coincidentally, the image that I had in my head when I was planning my funeral was almost identical to what we seen in during the memorial service for Kobe and Gigi, right? I mean, I was envisioning. The only thing was I was having mines in the football stadium, but that the question of how to fill a stadium, right, led me to understanding that I had to take the pain and the suffering and that low self-esteem that led me to the railroad tracks and package it in such a way that would help other people, and just so on and so on, and those folks will help other people. And so I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do, right? But I just knew that I needed to use my life in a way that would impact people in a positive way, right? Because Rosa Parks committed an act that we feel all the way up to the day we feel the consequences of that act. And so when I walked out of that group therapy session and that young man told me that something I said caused him to have a paradigm shift, caused him to have a different, a more positive outlook on life, something had erupted inside of me that I never knew existed. And I tell folks today that what I was feeling was a joy that not only did I didn't know that it existed, I didn't even know I was chasing that joy all of my life, right? And basically it came down to understanding my purpose. And it was very simple, right? Because when I looked at everything that God created, when I look at nature, it gives a little and it takes a little, right? And so I knew that my purpose was that to give back, that no matter what station I was in life, no matter how rich or poor, no matter what titles or degrees I had, that there was always someone else who was worse off than me, and that there was someone who I could pour into, right? And so I realized at that moment that all of those negative things that I went through in life, right? I mean, to include the homelessness and the drug addiction, all of those things became worthwhile if I could impact one life, right? And so I quickly understood that my purpose in life was to give back, right? Was to share whatever it was that I was being blessed with other folks, right? And
Mhm.
that's what I did.
Mhm. So I want to circle back to one thing you said. You said that it was worth it if you could help one person. So do you have any regrets about your past? Or do
Oh,
you think that
none.
none? I love it.
None whatsoever. Because
None.
and here's the thing that all of us, and this is, I'm telling you, it's an ingredient that's in that book, right? Because
Mhm.
it is a special sauce that would take our pains and our traumas, right, and take us to a place to where, even looking back at that now, that we don't regret that, right? Because that pain and that trauma that we went through. Matter of fact, I'll give you a great example, right? I believe that, and I learned this in school, right? How do you get muscles, right? How do you get muscles? In order for you to get muscles, you have to tear muscles, right? And in order for you to tear muscles, you have to experience some type of resistance, right? That stress, and you have to fight through it, right? And you fight through it, and you tear that muscle, and once you tear it, in its healing process, it grows another layer of muscle over it, right? And you repeat that process over and over and over again, and really, you can flex like me a little bit, right? But here's the deal, right? When you talk about that person that has gotten stronger, that has gotten faster, because they've gone through those things and have experienced those tears and the pain and suffering, do they regret that? No, they
Mhm.
don't regret that, because they realize that that pain and suffering that they endured made them who they are today, right? And if the
Yeah.
key is that if who you are today is all about you, then yeah, there might still be some regret. But if it's about our world, our society, our community, right? Then that makes all of that, man. You don't look back. No, I am proud of that, right? Because God
Yeah.
chose me to take me through these things so I could be of greater service to Him. I have nothing to
I love
regret.
it. I love it. So let's talk a little bit more about the initiatives that you have. I mentioned in the intro that you've helped restore voting rights for over 1.4 million Floridians that are past that have a past felony. Um, what can activists do that are not in Florida? Like, how can they do the same thing for returning citizens like yourself so that they are able to vote?
Well, I mean, they're doing it. Let me tell you, there is a cadre. First of all, we always hear that those are closest to the pain are often the ones that are closest to the solution, right? And
Mm,
so I believe that, like, listen, if you have a women's rights movement, you don't see a man leading it, right? Uh, um, or LGBTQ movement, you don't see a straight person leading that. And so when you're talking about, like, say, criminal justice reform, when you're talking about issues that impact people with felony convictions, right? Then the movements that are the most successful are those that are led by those who are directly impacted. And so, if
yeah.
any of your viewers are a person who have a previous felony conviction, this could be right down your lane right there, and you would connect with a cadre of organizations and leaders across the country that is doing this work. Just recently in California, Prop 17, you have formerly incarcerated people like Dorsey Nunn and Susan Burton and Taina Vargas and others who led a very successful a campaign to restore voting rights to people even while they're on parole, that they can now vote, right? You have people like Norris Henderson in Louisiana and Dara Atkinson in North Carolina, who just won a major, partial major legal victory that allowed thousands of returning citizens to vote. And so it's happening across the country as we speak. And the beautiful thing about it is that some of the biggest wins that this country have seen in the last 2 years were led by people who are directly impacted. And if any of your viewers are not directly impacted, then my advice would be to find those individuals, find those Desmonds and then the Norrises and the Susans and the Darrells, right? And plug into the work that they're doing and help support their leadership, because that's how it happens, man. Going back to even my spiritual orientation, one of the things that I always talk about is how when I go through the Bible, right, or even the Quran, what I've seen was that God always uses the least among a group of people to bring about the biggest change, right? And so I
Yeah.
do believe that it's the people who are suffering the most, that we have to support their leadership, right, and their strategic thinking, and be great allies and help them move their issue. And if we do that, we'll be successful.
Do you have any demands or expectations for this new presidential administration that's coming in?
you know, demands. I think that there must be a commitment to repair the harm that was caused by the '94 crime bill, right? And part of that is really addressing that narrative
Mm-hmm.
that drove uh, uh, that type of legislation. That's the same narrative that has driven a lot of things, and it's a false narrative. A good friend of mine, he wrote a book called African Americans and the Atomic Bomb, right, where it talks about the time when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, right, and how it obliterated. I mean, like what? God, I don't just cities. It actually eliminated cities. And to think about that, right? How the United States could obliterate two cities and not have to endure backlash from that. Matter of fact, people was
Mm-hmm.
cheering. And the key to that was what they did prior to dropping the bomb, and that was creating this narrative about Japanese people, that dehumanized them and desensitized the public towards Japanese. Right? It's that narrative. It's that same narrative that makes black men scary. Right? That desensitized the public to people with felony convictions. That allows the system to perpetuate these atrocities against, particularly against the African American community, and definitely against the people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system. And so uh, I would really push the administration to dig deep into deconstructing that false narrative and creating a new narrative. And in the process of that, changing policies that was based on an old narrative, and usher in new policies that respects a person's humanity and dignity, and understand that even though we make mistakes, we're still someone's son, someone's father, or daughter, or mother, or grandmother, or auntie.
Mm-hmm. So we have a few questions. Um, First question: how has your perception of God remained the same? Your life's obstacles.
Well, you know what? It didn't. It actually changed while I was going through drug treatment, right? And so one
Fair.
of the things that I came across was, okay, maybe I need to pray, because one of the things they talk about is that you have to first like acknowledge that you have a problem, and then you have to acknowledge that you're powerless, right? But that you acknowledge that there is a greater power, a higher power, that can help you get through this, right? And so I already had the spiritual background, a religious background, because my dad was a preacher, um, came from a Christian
Right.
family. And so I was like, okay, well, one of the natural things that we do is pray, right? So when I went to pray, it's funny, because if you ever grew up in a black church, right, you always have this deacon that know how to do those prayers, right? And the prayers where they got to take a breath, all right, Heavenly Father, heavenly, they come to you with all kinds of right, and they got a little rhythm and cadence
That's
to
for
it,
the Southern
and that's
churches.
powerful stuff, right? I mean, it gets you. I mean, it really amps you up, and so there I was in the treatment room trying to replicate that, right? Heavenly Father, I come to you as humble as I know how, right? And trying to be like Deacon so and so, right? And it dawned on me. I had a revelation. I'm like, wait a minute, stop for a second, time out. Number one, right? A lot of times, as growing up, we were taught that God is this vengeful God, this fiery God that's going to cast us into hell, and how you have to be perfect to come to church and all of that kind of stuff. And what I realized during treatment was God was not this vengeful God type person, right? And I was like, wait a minute. I don't need to talk to him like he's some vengeful God that I got to use all these different elaborate words with more than one syllable and all that kind of stuff, right? That if I look at him as he's my best friend, then I'm able to talk to him, because you can tell your best friend anything. You be like, child, man, I got off, at work and this and that happened. You can lay it down. Just think about it. You got your little glass of wine and you're talking to your best friend and telling her all that mess that you're going through, right? Or you're a fella, you got your cigar, maybe a little yak, you're hollering at your boy and you telling him about all this drama that you got to deal with your baby mama or whatever, right? Or your boss. You're able to get all that stuff up out of you when you talk to that trusted best friend that you know is going to keep your secrets, right? And so I realized when I was in treatment, I'm like, if I'm able to see, if I try to emulate somebody else's prayer, I'm not going to be able to get all of the things I need to get up out of me talking to God, right? And so I'm like, the best way to do that is to look at him as he's a friend and talk to him like he's my best friend, right? Who I can tell everything to, right? And I don't have to worry about my secret getting out. And I'm able to get all that junk up out of me. And man, it felt good. It felt good, man. And so the attitudes around prayer and how I looked at God shifted while I was in recovery, because it created my experience in recovery created a more closer relationship. And it was a relationship where, even though I made a mistake, that wasn't a God to condemn me because I made a mistake and look down on me. That's what helped perpetuate the addiction, right? Being ashamed of the things that I've done or whatever. But understanding that the higher power that I acquiesce to is a higher power that would not like cast judgment on you with your mistake, but will work with you to take your mistake and turn it into something that's so positive, right? That would take our hurt and our pain and help you use it in a way to help other people, right? And so not to be ashamed of my mistakes, but to recognize it, right? And learn from it and use those mistakes as an instrument, right? To help other people, right? And create a better community.
I love that. Another question. What did you face to get the law passed, to get Amendment 4 passed? Because I would suspect there were some challenges.
Oh, you want some dirt? Yeah. The person that asked that question want a little dirt. I give a I give a little something. But no, actually, let me tell you,
Yes.
and this is so true. The biggest obstacle to passing Amendment 4 did not come from opposition. It did not come from the Republican boogeyman. The biggest obstacles that I've had to overcome came from people who are supposed to be allies, right? My experiences from the campaign, even all the way up to now, have caused me to believe that a lot of times that we really need to rethink who our opposition is, right? And it caused me. I remember OJ McDuffie. He played. He was a wide receiver. He played football some of his time he spent with the Miami Dolphins. And I remember reading years back that he had this thing about life is like 1% of what people do to you, 90% of how you react to it, right? And even in recovery, where they have the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? All of that and my experiences have led me to believe that the thing that prevents us from being successful, right, is not something that's external, but something that's internal, right? And that we have to look amongst our coalition, right? And address the issues. Because a lot of times because we're so used to making sure that we have a clear enemy, right? And we say, okay, they're always going to be our enemy, right? That we spend so much time pointing at that enemy and we choose to conveniently ignore the issues that we have internally, not even realizing that the main hindrance to our success, our liberation, our freedom rests right among us instead of outward, right? And so that was a challenge we was able to overcome. I think there's still challenges there in so much of our movement, right? And we see it, we see it. And I think that once we're able to be courageous enough to not only just call it out. Calling it out is one thing, right? But what are the solutions to repairing those issues or those tears? What is the strategy in dealing with the trauma that was caused internally, right? Because when we start to heal ourselves, then we can actually do even greater things.
And so this is our last question, and then we're going to close out. It's kind of connected to your answer, but this question is: what advice would you give to young activists when faced with discouragement and obstacles?
Well, that's a great question, right? And here, once again, it's piece of that is in the book, right? That's what. And listen, your viewers got to get this book. I'm telling you, it's there, plain English. I think that the first thing is that they have to figure out who they are. What do I mean by that, right? That you have to figure out whatever it is that you're doing. Are you committed to it, or are you making a contribution to it, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people get those two things confused. And so what I did, and I put it in the book, is really talk about that, right? The difference between contribution and a commitment could be summarized by thinking about a ham and cheese omelet, right? That in a ham and cheese omelet, you have the egg, the ham, the cheese, and the milk. You know, I use milk because when I was growing up, because it stretched the eggs, right? And we know that the cheese and the milk come from the cow, the eggs come from the chicken, and the ham come from the pig. I always tell people that the cow made a contribution to the ham and cheese omelet. The chicken made a contribution to the ham and cheese omelet. The pig, he made a commitment to the ham and cheese omelet, right? And that meant that the chicken and the cow, they just gave a little something. They was able to walk away and go about their business. But the pig had to give his life. And so when you're engaged in whatever type of activism on whatever type of issue, right, you first have to be able to understand who you are. You the chicken? Are you the cow? Are you the pig? Right? You have to know that, because you can't be taking on a pig responsibility if you're only willing to be the cow or the chicken. And you have to understand that, you know, if you're committed to something, you have to be willing to give your life for it, right? And if you're willing to give your life for it, now I could talk to you about the moments of discouragement. And you know, I had a lot of those. Like everybody and their mama and all of the experts told me I was crazy to even think that I could even get a ballot initiative placed on a ballot, much less even passed, right? Not in this political climate, and not in the state of Florida, which is the most difficult state to pass a ballot initiative. But not only did we pass it with no opposition, and we passed it by bringing together people from all walks of life, had unlikely allies, people who you never thought would be a part of the campaign, was a part of the campaign. We was able to accomplish that in spite of the fact that everybody else said, you're crazy. That would never happen. That would never happen. That would never happen. You don't have no money. And we didn't have the money. But guess what? We did anyhow. We did. And I can tell you that when you're committed to something, when you've given a vision, that you don't let anyone else determine the path that you take, that you remain steadfast, because especially if your motivation is grounded in love, right? If your motivation is grounded in some type of personal gain or selfish reason, I don't know, but I know if it's grounded in love, and this is a vision that's been given to you, that if you stay the course, if you stay the course, that you will be successful. And those moments that you feel despair, those moments that you feel like you're overwhelmed, those are moments that you embrace, because it is going through those moments that makes you stronger, make you better prepared to actually come out and lead on the other side. That's the advice I would give.
I love that. I love that. That's for anyone. In addition, Desmond, such amazing time. I wish we had like 2 more hours. Honestly, your book is so well. Can people find the book?
They they can go to desmondmeade.com. That's my name, DesmondMeade.com, to order my book. I definitely want to highlight that there are many book sellers out there. I know that one of those that's listed on my website is Mahogany Books. It's a black owned bookstore. You know, like to encourage people to support black businesses, but they can order it Amazon, Target, Penguin Book, all kinds of places. But it's there for the taking. I would encourage folks to get it. Not because I want to sell, but because I want that story to get out, and I want those recipes to get out. Let people know that no matter who you are, no matter what station in life you are, no matter what obstacles may appear before you, or obstacles that you have to go through, or you're facing right now, right? That in spite of all of that, you can overcome those things, and you could do great things in your community, in the state, in this country, and you can make this world, you can contribute to making this world a better place for so many others. And when we do that, I tell people that one of the definitions I use of love, that I use, is wanting for your neighbor what you want for yourself, right? And so being able to fight for others, and be a blessing to others, would actually end up coming back and creating a better place for all of us to live. And I think that's what we really want deep down inside, that we do, going back to the beginning, that I think the average person do want to be loved, do want to be able to love someone. We want to be experience that connectivity with another human being. I believe we do want that. We want to live in a society where we're not scared of our neighbors, or we're not lobbing insults and fighting and hating each other. But I do believe that we prefer to live in a community where love abounds.
Thank you again and again. And that the name of Desmond's book is Let My People Vote.
Desmond, what an amazing conversation, Teresa. So glad you can come back and join us with the technical issues. But we're living in this COVID Zoom world, so things like that are going to happen sometimes.
Thank you. That was an amazing conversation.
That's what we do. Listen, we fight technical difficulties, right? And we're going to emerge from that, even better.
Yeah.
And so we don't let it stop us. And so I appreciate that we were able to power through this.
Yeah, I was so inspired. Teresa did such an amazing job, asking really thoughtful questions. And Desmond is such an inspiring person. This is exactly why I wanted to have this type of conversation, to have amazing people like you, Desmond, and talk about your journey, where you started, how some of the challenges that people can say, okay, he went through that, that means I can make it as well. And then inspiring people to create movements of their own. Like, we want people to leave this conversation and say, you know what, if he did it, I can do it too. So with that, I do want to give away a book, and I will be ordering from Mahogany Books. I know the owner's person, because I'm in the DC area, because I like supporting Black-owned businesses. So I would say drum roll, but we don't really have a drum. But we did a random drawing, and the winner of Desmond Meade's book, Let My People Vote, as well as the kweliTV sweatshirt, is Leela Brown. So congratulations to Leela Brown. She's a kweliTV annual subscriber, and you'll be getting an email from us within 24 hours about having the book shipped to your house, as well as you get to choose any sweatshirt from our merchandise website. So congratulations, Leela. And with that, we can just end it from here. Any last thoughts from Desmond? How can people reach out to you if they want to follow you on social media?
Yeah, so Deshaun, thank you so much. Folks can hit me up on Twitter, definitely at Desmond Meade. They can hit me up on Instagram at Desmond Meade 44. But my last words is really just shouting out kweliTV and what you're trying to do, Deshaun. I think it's great. I'm definitely glad to be a part of that, and just encourage folks to spread the word about what's going on here.
Thank you so much. I've been following you for a while, so whenever we do kweliCon, I have to get Desmond first. And once we can gather in person, I would love to have you to come back and talk again. You and Teresa can have another conversation. Won't be any technical issues that will be in our way. So hopefully, 2021, if all goes well, we can definitely do this in person. So thank you again.
Most definitely.
All right, family, until next time, we'll be doing more of these on virtual until we can meet in person. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for being a subscriber to kweliTV. And if you're not a subscriber, you can always go to our website, which you are on now, or on Facebook, to kweli.tv. We're only $5.99 a month or $50 a year. The first 7 days are free, and we have a lot of amazing independent films, documentaries about the African diaspora, content we won't see anywhere else. So thanks again for joining us. Until next time.